Hi guys, how are you doing and welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be a channeling with Charlotte Brontë, okay? And before I go any further, I do have some incense burning just to the side of the camera and some sage. So if you do see smoke, it could be that, okay? Because when I'm channeling, I always get a comment of, have you got something burning, Claire? Because I can see smoke. Now sometimes yes, it can be spirit, and sometimes it is mainly always some type of sage that I've got burning in the background. So it's really strange because as I was getting ready to come on, I've got my grid set up here, I've got my crystals, I've got my cards, I've got a picture of Charlotte, and I've got my candle lit, and I just sat here and I was like, God, I actually feel as though I'm in the presence of a great. And it's interesting because usually when I channel people, I get a lot of stuff pre-channel, pre-video, and I end up a lot of the time I get frustrated because I feel as I'm having to give you a lot of it that I've already got anyway before I even come on. Whereas Charlotte is very different. She's very respectful to the fact that we weren't all ready yet. And what she showed me earlier was her in the parsonage, and she was getting ready for us to come into the parsonage, and she was lighting fires, and there was a cake being baked, there was tea brewing, and it was a case of, don't worry, I'm not going to start until you're all here. One of the funny things as well, if you've been following me for a while, you know, sometimes I can film in here, which is the room stroke dining room, and sometimes it's in my treatment room and office. And that's depending on whether my husband Gary's here or not. And he's here today and he's in the office. And usually what I'd say if I'm doing a big video like this, I'd say to him, can I have the office and you go into here? And I didn't think anything of it, and I just came in here this morning and I set up for this reading in here on the dining table. And I was sat over there sorting my schedule out today, and I looked up and I thought, yeah, that's very Brontë-esque, because obviously those of you that know the Brontës know that a lot of their works are produced sat at the dining table, okay, in their front room, dining room. And it almost feels like, because I actually have a habit of doing this anyway, a lot of my big decisions, rather than sitting at my desk, I'll always come to a dining table, and it feels as though the energy flows more freely around a big table. And it's interesting because I'm looking as well, I'm being drawn to the fact that there's 3 empty chairs here, okay, and obviously Emily and Branwell, and it feels as though I'm being shown quite a sad time where everybody had passed apart from her dad, and she sat at a table that was once full of energy, full of hope, full of creativity, full of dreams, full of vibrancy, full of youngness and hope and coziness and safety and a roaring fire, to then be sat at that same table and seeing those empty chairs and hearing the echoing voices around your home, around the parsonage, and it feeling quite lonely. One of the things I did as well before coming on, I asked her to pull a card with us, and I've got 2 decks out ready for you. Love this one. This is the Literary Witches one, okay, and Priestess of Light. And the card that she pulled was Glove, and I was like, I picked it up and I was like, Glove, and I went. Those of you that watched my past life video, I talked about a trip to the parsonage that we had where there was a glove of Emily's in there, and Miss X, who we called Miss X because she's a minor, my niece, and she saw it and I said, oh look, there's Emily's glove there, and she was like, we're not going to judge what our reaction to it, and if you've watched that video you'll know the significance of that. But it just felt as though that was a little bit of humour coming through of, yes, I'm here, and yes, it's me, okay. Also as well, the meaning of that, because I actually looked up the actual meaning of it, and just bear with me, where are you? Glove, I will find it, Glove, money, status, complacency, and it feels as though life changed when she got published, and I'm almost hearing the message, it's actually a warning to us all to realise what we take on when we do something great, or where be it acting, be it painting, be it art, being the stuff that I do, that you can go from being a nobody to being somebody. And you may feel as though if only I get so many followers, or if when I get that £1 million, or when I get that book deal, or when I get my art accepted, life will become happy. And I'm here, and I'm feeling that for Charlotte, life actually became quite miserable. And what she's also saying is that it went from being able to paint, she did paint, being able to write for joy, turned into pressure. And the joy went from it, because she had other people with expectations, wanting more, wanting more, wanting more, you know, be it publishers, be it fan bases. And what was private and sacred was then opened up to the rest of the world, and it was meant to be opened up to the rest of the world. Those three sisters were not meant to be shrinking violets. They didn't come to the planet to just stay at Haworth and never be famous, to never be known. It was firmly in their soul contract that the doors were going to be flung open. And she's showing me the doors of the parsonage flung open. But as a human going through that without the knowledge of that, it can be quite derailing. And one of the things she said to me as I was getting ready to put my camera on was she felt like a curiosity. Now, if you know about curiosities, I only briefly know about them. Basically, it was people that had some form of disability, or it wasn't always disability, or can't get words out, were deformed in some way, or it could have been because they were overweight, or because they were small, or because they had long fingers, or they, you know, Google curiosities, and people actually used to go and watch and pay to in circuses and stuff. And one of the things I want to bring through at this point is, because of her size, because she was a small petite lady, and she had such a big brain, as in, not as in a big head, I didn't mean that, but as in energetically. And she was, I want to say, really intelligent. And she's showing me a scene back then in the Victorian times where she's walking into a room and people are like looking and nudging and ooh, and it's all very intrusive. And she was actually quite, when I say simple, I don't mean that in a derogatory, but a simple Yorkshire lass who was thrown into these circles that were just, she was accent as well. She said something about her accent, and it was almost like you felt like a curiosity. And I remember when we went to the parsonage and we literally stepped up the steps, and they greet you when you get in there. Not they as in the Brontes, well, probably do, as in the people that work there or volunteers. And we had my niece with us, and this female volunteer came up, and I was actually quite fuming, right, when this happened. She said, "Have you been here before?" And we're like, "Yeah, we've been here before. This is the first time for Miss X." And she was like, "Do you know she was about as small as you was, Charlotte?" And this was to Miss X, and Miss X back then she was a little girl, and she was small as a little girl. And I sat there and I thought, God, does it matter how small she was, how tall she was, if she was fat, if she was thin, if she had spots, if she had a bad hair day, does it matter? And she went on, and you'll see her dress upstairs and how small it was, and it was just like small, small, small. And I just thought, and I actually said to Gary when we walked past, I said, that was an attack on Charlotte, and it was an attack on the divine feminine. And it was as though, how can a woman so small produce such, and it was just really patronising. And it feels as though that energy needs to stop. And when people go into the parsonage, rather than thinking that's the sofa that Emily died on, and that's the that, and that's the that, it's about going in with respect and actually seeing these people as equals rather than gods that we idolise. And aren't they amazing? Or people that we look down on and judge their work, because remember, their work was from a different era. And she's also taking me now over to Emily's work, and the fact that Emily got such harsh judgment. And I must admit, the last time I read it, which was it last year? I can't remember. I lose. Do you know, since the virus, honestly, it's weird. I lose track of years. It's weird anyway. And moving out anyway. Come back to Charlotte. And I actually remember myself, and I was guilty of this, going, whew, wasn't that heavy? But yes, it was, you know. But, you know, there's a lot of feminist energy out there that run at Emily, run at them all. and in a derogatory way, you know, she's too quiet, you know, that's Anne, you know, she's too wild, that's Emily, she's too intelligent, that's Charlotte. And it's just like, she's too cold, and it's just like, stop labelling these people, because the truth is, what I'm seeing is, I'm seeing the three sisters in front of me. They were a mixture of everything. There were times when they were all confident. There was a time when one wasn't confident, the other one could speak up for them. There was a time when they could all be wild. There was a time when they could all be reckless. There was a time when they could all be thoughtless. When there was a time they could all, you know, it was all, they're sick of these labels, and it's time we banish the labels. But she's also saying banish the labels for ourselves. Right, let me take a drink. I keep looking to the side as well. I've got a picture, I've got the book up, but I've got, yeah, this is the book that I told you about last time, but I've got it up, so that's why I keep looking at it, okay? Also as well, what she wanted to say as well was that she actually did look like that. Again, when you actually look at some of the stuff out there, people, I'm sorry, I'm being ignorant here, but apparently the rumour is that the artist that that drew it, liked to paint his people in complementary styles. And yes, that was true. That was true of all artists. It wasn't true of just him. It was true of all artists. When you do art, back in the Victorian times, this is what I'm hearing, that's what you do, okay? That's what they did. It doesn't mean to say for 1 minute that she actually had two heads, you know, three eyes, and she actually did look very much like that. She said it was all about bringing the brightness out, and it was a bit like, she's saying it's a bit like, you know, where they do on the magazines where they take out the flaws. She said, but she actually looked like that. And she's also saying she wasn't as small as people. I mean, when I went to the parsonage, honestly, they were making her out to be Hobbit, and it was really, really, really disrespectful. And I must admit, I did actually feel like putting a complaint in, because it was just, this was a woman as well, and this is someone that works or volunteers in the parsonage. But when I first felt her energy come through this week as well, I actually felt quite tearful, because she was so humbling, and she's actually very gentle. That's another thing as well that I'm shocked, because some of the books you read, you know, she's portrayed as being quite cold in some books, depending on who you watch, who you read, etc. She was actually quite kind. She feels quite kind, and she's quite gentle, and she's very empathic. They were all very empathic. They could see a lot more of what was around them than a lot, and this isn't from a judgy empath, you know, that's not what I'm talking about. No. That's something else that we don't bring into this channel, but this was having real heart-centered empathy. And I'm seeing voluntary works as well, not just as part of being the parson's daughters, but this was because they were kind and they liked to help. And there's a lot of things that she's saying that are not in the books, that are not in the books written about them. There's a lot of really interesting stuff about all of them, all of the family members, that's just not there. And her past life, she had a past life as Daphne du Maurier. And this was something that came up pre-filming. And she showed me it as, because obviously if you think about Rebecca and you think about Jane Eyre, and Rebecca are very similar. And I must admit, I've always wondered, because I have read both. I love it where she says, read it, I married him. I think that's beautiful. But so I'm going a bit blank, but Jane Eyre, what am I going to bring it back to Daphne du Maurier? So Daphne du Maurier, there was some information that came through there that I was just trying to, I want to just focus on Daphne du Maurier. So when she came through again as Daphne du Maurier in that incarnation, she's saying that she had more time to write, and she had a clearer energy in that lifetime, because one of the things she's saying is that the Brontë past life, the Brontë life she had, there was a lot of heavy karma. There was a lot of the personalities that all came together had a lot of, for although they were close as a family and loved each other as a family, there was a lot they had to work through karmically, and there was a lot of noise. One of the things she's also showed me was that the parsonage was quite a noisy place, because, you know, if you think you had 4 adult children in there, you had your father in there, you had maids in there, you had people coming in church business, for adults to actually create, and actually they were quite clever to create what they created with all that buzz around them. You know, when you think about writers now, I have to go somewhere quiet, I have to go here. You know, I mean, they did have the moors and they did have quiet spaces, but she said it was actually very difficult to write at times in there compared to when she was Daphne. It was just about, in the lifetime as Daphne, it was just about her creativity, and that's not a case of her being the Brontes. There was Anne and Emily and Branwell, and I didn't want them there. It was, what she showed me earlier was, imagine 4 people sat around this table. Though we know about energy on this channel, and you've got 4 stories going on, and 4, I mean, those were powerful books: Wuthering Heights, Agnes Grey, Tenet of Wildfell Hall, Jane Eyre, etc. They were really powerful stories, and that was all energy that was swirling, plus also the energy of the graveyard and the darkness of the graveyard, which we covered in Emily's channeling. When she was in Daphne's lifetime, she was much more clear-headed, and she'd learned a lot from the incarnation of Charlotte. She'd learned to let go of a lot of the neuroses that she had, as we have as well, and a lot of the imposter syndrome. Because she did look different, and she was different from a lot of the other Victorian ladies. It was more a frequency. It hindered her going forward with her books, and also what she's saying as well is the trauma of sisters dying, brothers, obviously Branwell died, and then the 2 sisters died, and then being in the parsonage on your own with an ageing, ailing father, and she was a young woman, and all that impeded, you know, the creatives that follow me, that trauma. You know, most people that go through a bereavement, it can knock them sick for months and years, and it can really have an impact on their creativity. You think about Charlotte, and it was like one after the other, and then to be left at this empty table. So as a life at Daphne, that's when she was able to cover a lot more ground with her books. And being in Cornwall as well, the Cornwall connection, and Charlotte's mother, Maria Branwell, came from Cornwall, so it was as though going back to another one of her spiritual homes, and the energy felt much cleaner. But obviously, karmically, as Daphne, she had a husband who again was an alcoholic, so she had to revisit the Branwell trauma in another form. I mean, if you go into the Daphne, I mean, Daphne wrote The Infernal World of Branwell Brontë, and towards the end of her life, Daphne struggled to remember a lot of her own life as she was ill and dying, Daphne. But one of the topics of conversation that she could still hold her own on was the Brontes, and I know that Daphne used to visit Haworth, so that explains why that. Also as well, while I'm here, if you're new to me, when I channeled Anne Brontë, because I've also channeled Anne Brontë on here, Anne Brontë is now J.K. Rowling, so you can look up, I mean, there is a playlist on here, Brontë playlist and a channeling playlist with all my channels and channeling in, and the Brontes, all the Brontë stuff I've done, so feel free to browse. And it feels it's the same for J.K. Rowling. I mean, you know, as Anne died young, but as J.K. Rowling, I mean, look how J.K. Rowling has her voice now, and look at the books that she's written. It's almost like they had to all part to become even more creative in their own right, as though together, it's an energy thing, together it was just like, but to take it to the next level, it was they had to be apart, and they had to then go off, and they came together in that incarnation to help each other, because these were 3 I mean, there were 4, I'm focused on the 3 sisters. No, she's saying include Branwell as well, so include Branwell. So these were creative people that came together to swap ideas, but it's almost as though I'm seeing that the Harry Potter books were being formed at that dining table as well. The Daphne, you know, Rebecca was formed at that dining table, and there's other books because they've also gone off and done other things, other reincarnations. they came together in that passage. I said this, I think it was in the Anne or the Emily video, where there is a ley line or a portal through that parsonage. And this was one of the things why I said what I said yesterday about opening that parsonage up, to, not as a museum, but as a creative hub, because there's ley lines and there's portals that were opened up by these people. They were very spiritual as well, not as in New Age woo-woo, but as in really, they had real mystical powers, and they were opening up portals without even realising it. And just gonna get some water. It's very powerful stuff, you know. It's really, it's me having to really think, because I'm getting like threads. They're sat at the table, but they're writing books, but they're not just writing the physical books of the time. They're there, they're writing, energetically writing Rebecca. They were passing information out via telepathy as well. She's saying as Charlotte, she actually dreamt. She's showing me her dreaming as Charlotte Brontë. A lot of the books that she wrote as Daphne are the books that she never got the chance to write as Charlotte. And she's showing me a lot of the downloads and dreams that she would actually have. She was actually dreaming about the lifetime to come as Daphne, as Charlotte. And when she became famous, she was shocked because it was very different to how she dreamt it. It's almost like she's saying, I got my timelines mixed up. When I became famous, it was very difficult for it in that incarnation of Charlotte. And it's like, we sit now, say if I'm sat and I think, oh, when I get to 1 million subscribers, it's going to be like this. And I get to 1 million subscribers and it's like, oh, it's not as good as I thought. But what I'm thinking of is in a next lifetime when I get to 2 million subscribers. Am I making sense? It's a bit of a mind blower, is this? I've not actually read all of the Daphne books, but what she's saying is a lot of the Daphne books have Brontë energy in them, and as Daphne she could tap into, and Daphne never knew she was Charlotte incarnated, but she could tap into the energy of Emily, the energy of Branwell, the energy of Charlotte, the energy of the parsonage. She could tap into that and she could channel it. And all of them worked through Daphne to some extent to help her. Because as Daphne, she was very lonely as well as Charlotte. She said she's had many lifetimes of being surrounded by many people, but being really lonely. And she thinks it's because her imagination, she's aware her imagination is vast. And it's almost like she'd probably fit in more now, because we're all imagination and we're all creativity and we're all opening our third eyes and crown chakras. And it's weird that I've done that today on the group healing, but she'd fit in now more than she did then, because some of the conversations she tried to have with people, it'd be like, you see a group of Victorian ladies all, and it's like, and she'd have these really deep, spiritual, creative conversations. I know my camera's going on, so what I'm going to do is, I know it's going to be a part 2, so shall I just go straight, because I want to pick some cards, because one of the things she showed me was her passing. I want to talk about her passing, talk about marriage, and talk about one of the questions I liked was, how does she view romance in the world that we have today? Okay, so that will be in part 2. If you've enjoyed this, part 2 will either be, I always do this, don't I? It'll either be above or below, okay? But please do join us in part 2. If not, what I'll do is I'll put part 2 in the description below this video. So click on the title, the description will come up at the side, and you just click on that and you can join us in part 2. Thanks for watching. See you later. Goodbye.